Welcome to the First 90 Podcasts, where we discuss strategies to improve employee onboarding. Today, we're talking with Kelly Pasztor. She is the head of global learning and development at Grafana. Kelly, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to talk to you about something I'm so passionate about.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this conversation. I like to begin most episodes with a fun question just for people to get to know you a little bit better. Tell us, what was your very first job that you had?
Oh my gosh. So my first job was while I was in middle school. Back in the 90s, there was a really popular toy called the American Girl doll. And there were three of them, Kirsten, Samantha, and Molly. And my first job was dressing up as a live version of the Samantha doll and going to bookstores and signing autographs for other kids. So it was their marketing ploy for the Pleasant Company to increase their revenue. So you get to be the doll in real life.
That's amazing. That's a great story. Do you remember at all the first day?
Yeah, they didn't really give us much of an onboarding process. I probably would have liked one being only 12, but yeah, they told me to show up with my hair done a certain way and in the outfit that the doll wears. And then I walked in the door and they handed me a pen and they're like, just stand over there and wait for people to come. I was like, okay, this is it.
Yeah, I imagine 12 years old. I mean, I think anytime you start a job, there's always first day nerves and uncertainties that you feel. But I imagine, especially as a 12-year-old, having to interact with people, there was quite the nervousness there on the first day.
Yeah, it was good foreshadowing for all of the training and facilitation I'd do someday. So it all worked out.
I discovered you were in a session where you were talking about onboarding at Grafana,
Yeah.
and there was this concept you mentioned, which is why I wanted to have you on the podcast. You do something called co-located onboarding, which
Mhm.
I love that term. I loved it even more once you explained it to me, what it is and how it functions. So give us first just an overview of what co-located onboarding means, and then we'll dive into how it actually functions.
Grafana Labs is actually about a 1,300 individual organization, and we're spread out across over 50 countries. So we're remote first, but not remote only. And so it's really important for us to bring people together. And the best way to help somebody with their onboarding process and have them get to know your culture is by bringing everyone together. So we do a monthly unified start date. And when we started this back up post pandemic, it was in Austin, Texas, and Stockholm, Sweden. But now we just do it in one location. So I was actually there just this week in Washington, D.C.
That's great. We look back 2020, the pandemic, a little bit before that, remote work was starting to become a trend, but obviously 2020, everyone started going remote. And now we're seeing a little bit of a switch where companies are wanting more of this hybrid work, but it sounds like Grafana is still primarily a remote work first company. But maybe talk a little bit about what the difference you have seen with kind of bringing people together in that second week.
Yeah. So I think being a remote first organization, uh, you know, it can be difficult to build relationships. And so we have this first week that's virtual where people are really just getting the lay of the land. They'll meet their manager, they'll get everything set up on their computers, all of the right systems and tools. But after that, it's kind of like, what's next? And so we've strategically placed in person onboarding that second week so that they're not too far into the actual onboarding experience. And they're getting to meet Grafanistas from all over the globe. And we actually have a lot of the facilitators of all the onboarding sessions are key leaders from across our organization. So it's a great opportunity right up front for them to get socialized into what our culture is like and understand what we're looking for in our Grafanistas.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And I'm sure your employees notice the difference when they are getting to meet people in real life, put a face to the name, and actually meet the leaders. I'm sure they feel welcome and then immediately a part of the company.
Absolutely. It's an intense week for them. We pack in a ton. We're teaching them how to Grafanista, which is all about kind of our company culture, our history, our products, and the key skills we want to teach them. But we also do pack in a little bit of fun. This week, I think everyone went bowling. So
When we were talking, I think having the first week, and then you have the second week, which is in person, which is amazing, and that's great onboarding. But then I think it gets even better because you have something that goes on for 6 months. So you're not thinking of onboarding as just the first 2 weeks for these employees.
Yep.
Onboarding at Grafana is actually, it goes over 6 months, which I think is incredible because someone's not fully up to speed after 2 weeks. So tell us a little bit more. What happens over those 6 months? What are the employees going through?
So I read this great book a long time ago called The Power of Moments. It's by Dan Heath, and it talks about how you have this opportunity to create these really memorable experiences. So that's what we were trying to accomplish here with in-person onboarding. And people are walking away with a bit of, a high, like everyone's really excited to have met their coworkers and whatnot. And we wanted to capitalize on that momentum. We didn't want to let that go. And so what we've designed is monthly engagement opportunities that go for 6 months where they're continuing to learn with that same cohort of people. So they get that continued opportunity to build relationships that with the folks that they met in person. They're also getting exposure to new leaders because we have different leaders from around the organization facilitating these opportunities. And then it's really just, helping them as learners go deeper on different topics. So one of the big topics we cover in that first 6 months is the concept out of the book, The Culture Map. So The Culture Map by Erin Meyer is a fascinating book that really looks at how cultures around the world vary on all of these different spectrums, like building trust and communication. And since we're in, 50 different countries, we have a lot of that going on. And we wanted to set the tone right on early from the start that we value diverse voices and we want people to be respectful of all of these different cultures. So they have to do a little bit of education to really understand how to navigate that.
That makes sense. What results have you seen either through the 6 months and those monthly meetings or through the in person? What results have you seen as you've started to? I mean, you have been implementing this, but as you've had employees go through it and they've gone beyond those 6 months, what results have you seen?
Yeah, so I'll answer that in from two different angles. The first is the immediate feedback we get. The surveys we fill out, I mean, we get comments like, "This is the best onboarding I've ever been through," or "I really, really felt connected." So we definitely have that early information that we feel we're on the right track. But a big question for us was, okay, when we've got folks who have now gotten to a year in, what are we seeing? And actually, our VP of Culture, Matt Toback, he runs these different culture sessions that are also a part of that 6 months and actually at a year in. And what he's finding is that that sense of community and belonging continues. And we have started digging into some of the actual hard data too. And what we've seen is that for example, our sales development reps who have gone through our new onboarding process, their ramp time is lowered from where it was before we restarted in-person onboarding again.
Well, that's amazing. And I can relate to that from different job experiences in the past, some that I've started fully remote. And the difference when we get together in person early on compared to where I've worked, where I never got together in person with people or I never had that ongoing connection, you just feel completely different. You just have a different perspective about the company. So those are amazing results to hear. So, as much as there's this good side to the onboarding and you're seeing those amazing results, you've probably still had pushback because it's hard to fly everybody out. It's
Yeah.
expensive to fly everyone out. It's hard to put another meeting on the calendar every month for people to find this time. So, what pushback have you received as you've tried to make this a regular habit?
Yeah, that's a great question. We have experienced a few challenges. The first one I'd say is probably about location. So when you're bringing people in from all of these different countries, you have things like visas to worry about. And so when we were trying to coordinate between two locations, that was a big administrative lift for our team. So that's one of the main reasons we consolidated to one location. That also ended up helping us save on cost too, just because there were efficiencies gained by just doing one location. Cost was another big challenge. We asked ourselves in the beginning, do we really want to make this large of an investment? And I think what it came down to was the senior leaders and I agreed that this is really the first impression for all of these folks on what it's going to be like to work at Grafana Labs. So for us, it's a really good investment despite being a high cost. And then lastly, time. You hit the nail on the head with that. Like, I think that's probably the pain point of every L&D leader around the world. Time is always a barrier to learning. And it's just something that you end up needing to socialize. And so we've tried to strike that balance between just requiring the things that we feel are most important, either to our culture or in order to enable them to effectively do whatever role they're in. So we haven't made it intense by any means. It's just, 60 to 90 minutes a month. And we feel like that's a reasonable request. So we've tried to mitigate those concerns as best as possible, but it's still a work in progress. So
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think anytime you're talking about onboarding and cost, and when there's a dollar amount associated with things, I always like to flip the equation a little bit and talk about there's all this cost when employees leave. So if we don't do a good job onboarding and we have employees stay for a shorter amount of time, there's a lot of studies and people have different opinions on what that exact number is, but people throw out 2 to 3 times the cost of an employee to replace them. And so yes, some of those costs can be a little expensive on the front end, but they're way less than the cost of replacing an employee or retraining and doing all of that. So it's well worth investing early on and
I
making our
couldn't agree
employees
more.
successful. Yeah. Hey, one of the best things you can do for new employees is to give them a plan for their first 90 days. That's why we developed the First 90 Daily Planner. It gives new employees exercises every day for their first 3 months and a place to take notes as they're onboarding into their job. And because you listen to the podcast, we're giving it to you today for free. Go to 1490.com/planner to download your free PDF copy of it today. That's 14nynety.com/planner. With all these things you have going on, so if someone's listening, they wanna replicate it in some capacity. What systems do you have in place to make sure this happens for new employees? Because if you're doing this every month, you have all these cohorts that are going on. How do you keep all this running and
Yeah.
maintained?
Well, so I'll talk about the people and then I'll talk about the systems. The people we partner really closely with on the L&D team are the broader people team. So we have coordinators on our people operations team that are helping with this initiative. We have an events team. We have 2 amazing events team members that are helping do all of the sourcing and contracting for the logistics behind these types of offsites. We also partner very closely with our go-to-market enablement team. So the people are collaborating really closely. And then on top of that, we have a variety of systems that we're also using to gain some efficiencies. So we use our learning management system for a lot of this coordination. That's called Docebo. We also have email campaigns that we use through Mixmax, which is a tool that lets you kind of mass email at different time frames. And we do a lot with Slack, actually. I know that doesn't sound like it's super high tech or anything like that, but that is by far the most used tool at our company. It's our main means of communication. So as we're setting up a new cohort each month, for example, we're setting up a channel for that cohort. So it's there from day one through in-person onboarding and through that 6 months. And we're using that to really push out a lot of the content and the reminders. And to be honest, I think that Slack is probably the most valuable tool that we have in the process, just because that is the main means of communication. If I were sending emails, people probably wouldn't read them.
Right. And just to clarify, with the Slack, you are creating a channel with that cohort, you're putting them into a group, and it's just dedicated to that specific cohort that started that month. Is that how you're running that?
Absolutely.
What advice would you give to someone who's looking to replicate either the 6-month process or start to implement the co-located onboarding? What advice would you give to someone replicating that?
So, in order to make this happen, an absolute prerequisite is having a unified monthly start date. You cannot have people onboarding at any time of the month or year in order to do this effectively. So, getting your senior leadership team on board and all of the key groups that need to be involved, from finance to benefits, getting them all on board with a unified start date is definitely step 1. And then I would say it's making your business case for what value you're going to get out of doing something like co-located in-person onboarding. If you're a hybrid organization or a fully remote organization, I think the business case is pretty easy to put together.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe just help people with, they're having the conversation. I'm used to companies onboarding in cohorts of every 2 weeks of lining people up. So, is there any advice you can give when they're trying to make that pitch to let's go to once a month? Because I'm sure the pushback is we want people to start sooner. We want them to get going sooner. Any advice for people to help with that conversation?
It's actually not that different. So I hear that argument a lot. Like, yeah, I want to hire these people so that they can start sooner. But what you can do is actually partner with your recruiting team and just work with your hiring managers throughout all the different service lines or areas of your business to source those candidates and establish that pipeline earlier. So you're almost front loading that process so that they're still starting as soon as possible, but on the unified start date. So it requires a lot of collaboration from a lot of teams and a lot of managers throughout the business. But once you are all on the same page and aligned, you can definitely make it happen.
That's great. Well, Kelly, this has been a great conversation. There's lots of information for people to use here. Let's get to our last few questions here. What book do you recommend most to other people in this space?
This is tough because as a lead of L&D, I have a lot of books back there. Those ones are just my favorite. What you can't see are all the shelves over here with the other books. But if I had to pick one right now, I would probably say I'd recommend When by Dan Pink. It's about the scientific art of perfect timing. It's a great read. There's data in it that back up so many of the concepts, but there's also practical tips in that book as well for things you can do in order to leverage timing to the best of your ability. So that's a good one.
Awesome. I have not read that. I will get it added to my Amazon wish list right after this.
Nice.
And what is your favorite interview question?
So my favorite interview question, I don't know that all companies ask it, but my favorite interview question is essentially, what is the next item on your bucket list? Or if you don't have a bucket list, what would you put on it? I think it tells a lot about the human that you're talking to. So that's my favorite one.
I like that a lot. I like that a lot. Are you asking that early on in the interview or asking that towards the end? Is it a question you're trying to put them at that ease in the interview, or you're just,
Change it up. So
yeah, okay.
feel out the human I'm talking to, and then depending on where I need to put it, I put it there. But sometimes it's to open them up a bit at the beginning, and other times it's deeper into the conversation. So it's a little
Okay.
bit different every time.
That might be a good question to actually work into the podcast. That might become one of our speed round
Yeah,
questions. So,
I love it.
all right. And last thing, where can people find you online? How can people connect with you and be useful to you?
The best way to connect with me is on LinkedIn. So hop on over to my LinkedIn page. I have a services page if you're looking for help on anything, but there's a lot of information on there to connect with me. So I love connecting with other humans. I'm a part of a bunch of different Slack communities too. So, message me on LinkedIn. Not a generic message, but message me and let me know how you want help or if you want to chat about onboarding, and I'd love to have a conversation.
Amazing. Kelly, thanks for coming on the podcast. Really enjoyed this conversation.
Thanks so much for having me.